Well, welcome everybody. Great to see all of you today. If you are anything like most people, I'm guessing there is something in your life or something in this world that has your attention and it bothers you. You really wish there could be change, that something would be different about it. Maybe it's something in general in the world. Maybe it's injustice or abuse or neglect that it just really grips you, it bothers you. Or maybe it's more personal in nature. It's in your life, it's your finances, it's your health, it's something about your relationships, it's work, it's your faith, something about where your faith is. You just wish it was different. But for a period of time, sometimes for a long time, it just hasn't changed. It just is what it is. And last week we launched into a brand new series called Life Under Construction. If you weren't with us, you can go back and watch that message from last week. We said that the truth is all of us can identify an area or two or sometimes even more that we recognize it needs some construction. And we also recognize that change doesn't typically start by itself. It takes some serious effort. It takes some perspective to see real lasting change happen in our lives. So we're taking some lessons from the Old Testament book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah, anybody like Nehemiah is my favorite Old Testament character. All right. Or after last service, somebody was like, he actually is my favorite. We were going to name our son Nehemiah if we had a son. I was like, my bad. We are taking some lessons from Nehemiah because the book's named after the main character. We learned last week that Nehemiah is a cupbearer to the king of Persia. He longs to see his homeland in Jerusalem rebuilt and thriving, honoring God the way God called the people to honor him so many generations ago. And Nehemiah saw that change was needed. It needed to happen. And he took a few steps that as we look at his life, we could potentially it can help us see how we can make some changes as we long to see them happen in our lives as well. Last week we said that Nehemiah, when he recognized the change, he sat down and he mourned what the reality was in front of him. Then he bowed down to pray, bringing God into the equation, which, by the way, he does all the way through the journey. There's prayers all the way throughout the book of Nehemiah. The size of your prayer shows you the size of your God. And then after he prayed, he got up and he got going. He took action in what he longed to see happen in his life. And typically when we're bothered about something or we're burdened about something, we want to see a change happen, we can't always see the full end game. We can't see it. Many times we don't even know where to start. We want to see change, but how? And so often the it in our lives, the thing that we'd long to see, we just don't know how it's going to happen. What is it going to take to really see change stick in this area? Last time we saw Nehemiah, he was praying. He was praying to God for an opportunity to be able to have a conversation with the king that day. And he's burdened about Jerusalem. And now we pick up Nehemiah's story in Nehemiah chapter 2, Nehemiah 2, beginning in verse 1. Here's what it says. Early the following spring, in the month of Nisan, during the 20th year of King Artaxerxes' reign, I was serving the king his wine. I had never before appeared sad in his presence. Now, okay, some of us are like, hold on, pause. Did you say the month of Nisan? Because I thought Nissan was like a car company. And like, yes, I did, and that's what it says. Okay, recognize Nehemiah knows that a change needs to happen, and he recognized the very first time that we see him in the month of Kislev. Can you believe that much time went from Kislev to Nisan? And no change? Like, okay, so it means nothing to us. We don't usually use the Persian calendar, but if we did, we would realize that Kislev to Nisan is 4 months. 4 months, Nehemiah is praying night and day, night and day. And as far as we can tell, no opportunity for change. Nothing really happened in 4 months' time. And here's my question as we launch in. Are you willing to be committed enough to change that you want to see in your life, to lay it before God, perhaps day and night, even 4 months or longer with no action, knowing that only through God is real change going to happen? That's around 240 prayers to God with nothing back, as far as we can tell, seemingly no action. And he knows that any real change, and I really think this is critical for us to understand and really embrace, real change really has to be connected to God. If we try to change on our own, yes, we have the ability to do some things, but friends, real God-honoring, long-term change has got to be connected to who he is. And then one day, after 4 months, there was a breakthrough in verse 2. The king asked me, "Why are you looking so sad? You don't look sick to me. You must be deeply troubled." And then I was terrified. Now, this is the moment he had been waiting for. This is what he's expecting would happen one day. He's been praying about it 240 times, 4 months, at least 240 times. He's been praying and longing for and waiting for an opening to speak with the king. And now it happens, and he is freaking out. In his culture, one of the reasons he's so scared is it was forbidden for him to look sad around the king. You were not allowed to look sad around the king. And I'm thinking about instilling that in our house. It's now forbidden for you to look sad at any time. No, that's what they did. Like, he literally could be killed just for looking sad in front of the king. No sadness allowed. He speaks up though in his moment, and he's looking sad. The king notices, and then in verse 3, even though he's freaked out, he responds, I replied, "Long live the king. How can I not be sad? For the city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire." He's very clear on what he is burdened about. He says, "Long live the king," and hopefully, "Long live the cupbearer, and may I not be poisoned." And it's like the motto I would think, for all cupbearers, like "Long live the cupbearer" as well. He's completely clear on the situation. When we are longing for, Jerusalem is in ruins in his situation. The walls are torn down. He's very clear about it, and he knows the situation he's in. And if we're looking for long-term change, first question we've got to ask ourselves, we're going to wrestle today, is this: what are we so afraid of? Now, he's terrified for good reason, but we got to be specific in our lives. When we're looking at change, why are we so afraid to make the change or to get involved in the change that we long to see happen? He had a few things in Nehemiah's life. One of them, clearly, the consequences of looking sad before the king or even speaking up about this. He could be killed. But I got to think beyond that, he was afraid of stepping out into what God asked him to do. He prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed for God's clarity and God's guidance. And because Nehemiah knew that plenty of people that had gone before him for 140 years had tried to bring change in Jerusalem, and most of them had failed. If this wasn't God's desire, if this wasn't honoring to God, even though he wanted to see the change happen, he knew it had no chance of ever getting off the ground. If the change we want to see, friends, was easy for us, we would have already done it, right? So let's get real about what's holding us back and confront some of the fears that keep us from being the change or seeing the change we long to see. When you think about the changes you want to see happen in this world or in your own life, you got to ask yourself, what are you so afraid of? What is it? Identify the fears. Is it the fear of potential failure, that if you go for it, you might bring embarrassment or shame on yourself, or you bring more frustration or loss as a result? Are you afraid of that? Is it that you don't have all the answers? Some of us, we don't like to jump into something until we know exactly what's going to happen. So the potential of not knowing how it's going to play out or not knowing exactly what we're going to accomplish, is that a fear? Or is it just the reality of change? Sometimes we don't like change. And we know that change means breaking down some of the comfort zones we have in order to see something better on the other side. Is that a fear? What is it that you are so afraid of in your particular situation? Because when we answer that question, it will set us up to truly depend on God for the change as we identify the fears and bring it before him. And here's the deal. And I've said this, but I just think it's so critical. If God is in it, if the change we long for and that we're looking to see, if it is honoring to him, even when some of those fears are realized, because some things we're afraid of things and they're real. They're not like, we're not making stuff up. Those are like real things that could happen. If we give God the process and he's in the middle of it, even when the fears are realized, you know what he does? He doubles down on his blessings. He overflows in us with peace. Even though we're facing challenges and setbacks, he covers us with confidence that we could never muster on our own. He's so good like that, isn't he? To meet us right in the middle of whatever it is. So let's identify the biggest fears we face and move forward, call them out, and then hand them to the one who frankly isn't afraid of anything. He doesn't have anything that he's scared of. He can handle it, and that's what Nehemiah did. Look at verse 4. The king asked, well, how can I help you? And with a prayer to the God of heaven, I replied, if it pleases the king and you are pleased with me, your servant, send me to Judah to rebuild the city where my ancestors are buried. The king with the queen sitting beside him asked, how long will you be gone? And when will you return? And after I told him how long I would be gone, the king agreed to my request. Now, I love this little section of verses because the king actually gives Nehemiah a chance, the one chance. We don't know if it would have been another opportunity. In 4 months' time, this is his one moment to make a request. And verse 4 says that before he spoke with a little prayer to the God of heaven. This is one of those prayers that happens in like 2 or 3 seconds, and there's more in you in the prayer than words that you have time to utter. Anybody prayed a prayer like that? Where you're like, God, all this. Whoop. We don't have his prayer, but I think his prayer went something like this, if I may speculate. It went something like this. Oh God, thank you so much. I thank you for this moment. Wow, I've been praying about this. You brought this moment together. You heard my 240 plus prayers. You're answering them in this moment. Thank you. Thank you for opening the eyes of the king. Thank you for this moment where he saw that I was sad. Thank you for this moment where he's actually asked me, oh my goodness, God, please help me not to blow this. Sometimes I say things in a weird way. Sometimes I forget details. Sometimes I stumble my words. This may be my only chance. God, help me to get this right. I'm not really a construction guy. I'm not even exactly sure how that goes. I'm a cupbearer. But in this moment, help me be clear on what I see. And God, please help him say yes. Please help him say yes. I know that I'm going to need him. Thank you. I am so scared. I'm really scared in this moment. God, help me to be peaceful in future. Jesus' name, amen. Now, that was a 2-second prayer, right? We don't have all the word, but you know what? We're packed with all of the thoughts and feelings, and in the moment, we throw a prayer before God. And here's what I want to look, little sidebar. Short prayers honor God too. The short little 2-3 second prayers are part of walking with him and connecting to him and honoring him in all these moments every day. So often when I walk into a situation, I'm sure you do too, you're walking through something with somebody that you're like, man, I did not know that was happening in their life, or they're asking for wisdom, or you're walking into a situation that's definitely elevated, something heavy's going on, or even as simple as you're at Sam's trying to decide on making a purchase, or you're trying to calendar something and whether or not your schedule is going to allow for that. Friends, those are spiritual things that we can lay before God and say, God, please fill me with your wisdom. One of my often just regular prayers is simply, God, fill me with your wisdom. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I don't know if I'm supposed to buy that thing that seems very not spiritual, right? But it is, because every bit of our life is before God. We need his wisdom in all of those moments. And we've been going to him, if we have, day after day, night after night, like Nehemiah. Then when those moments come and decisions are made or changes are in process, then we are ready to be led by the Spirit for the decisions or the action that honor him. And that's what Nehemiah does. And then he shares super clear vision of the change that he hoped to see happen. Did you catch it? So when we're thinking about your own life, not only are we going to say, what are the big fears? What are we afraid of? The second big question is this: what is the specific vision? And what do you really want to see change? What is it that needs addressed in this world or in your life specifically? Last week we talked about sitting down and mourning the situation that it is. It shouldn't be the way that it is. It is what it is. We own the reality today so we can see change for tomorrow. But a life under construction means we turn our confession or the reality of our situation into a vision of what could be. Do you have a vision of where you want to go and what is going to honor God in your life? Do you actually have a vision for that? Now, blurry vision leads to blurry results. If we don't have clarity on where we're headed, we don't have clarity on what happens, right? And for vision for change it could be that we have a burden for something. That is, like we've been talking about the foster situation in Illinois, right? I wish there were less foster kids. Who has that burden today? I wish there were less foster kids. Okay, some of us love Jesus. That's fantastic. Okay, awesome. That is a genuine, heartfelt longing. I wish there were less foster kids. But that is not really a vision. Right? What if through prayer and some research and actually wrestling down a burden like that and digging in, the vision became something more like, I want to eradicate the need for foster care in my county. There won't even need to be any in my county where I live. That's a clear vision. That is a God-sized vision. Doesn't matter what county you live in, but that is a God-sized measurable vision. For many of us, one of the main problems in seeing real change is not a lack of caring. We care. It's a lack of clarity. We care about our family. We care about our life. We care about our health. We care about our church. Care about our community. We care. A lot of people care. We don't have clarity on what we're trying to actually accomplish. What is it that you specifically are burdened to see happen? And what then does the vision look like to actually attack it? It honors him when we are crystal clear about the changes we long to see. So I want you to get your phone, and whoever's phone is ringing, silence. Get your phone. And last week we talked about having, some of you that were here last week, we opened a notes app. We started writing some stuff down. Some of you were playing games instead. That's okay. Open your notes app again, and I just want to encourage you to write this sentence down and then wrestle. Maybe you even have an answer for it now. In one sentence, what is God calling you to change? Be clear about vision. What is God calling you to change that now goes from like something bigger to specific, something like this, okay? Here's one that maybe you'll grab onto. I long to go to Judah so I can rebuild the city. Okay, that one's already taken by Nehemiah. You don't have to do that one, all right? But maybe it's something like this. I desire to lead my family to become totally debt-free by the end of the year. We have a burden to become debt-free, to handle your finances differently. Maybe it's about giving. Maybe it's like, I want to give X amount of money financially to Cornerstone before I turn 40 years old, before the end of the year. I want to be willing to, and then you set up a vision or plan to accomplish that. I want to lose 20 pounds and develop an exercise rhythm to help me maintain the new weight. Or I want to have a personal conversation with every person on my sports team by the end of the season about Jesus. How is that going to happen? Which practice are you going to do that? I don't know. We're just saying I actually have a vision, not just a desire to share faith, but a vision to say I want to just have one conversation with every person on my team. You may not have every detail sorted out yet, but you can put clear vision to a burden that God gives you. Why would it not make total sense to take the time and energy to actually identify vision in our lives to see lasting change? If you can't chase it, you can't change it. So what is it clearly that God is calling you to change? And I think one note of encouragement that is critical in this step is don't ever forget this truth. There is nothing too big for God's power or too small for God's heart. That's what Craig Rochelle said. There's nothing too big for God's power and too small for God's heart. The size of your vision is not an issue for God. If you know that change needs to happen and it honors God and you are day and night bringing it before him, it doesn't matter how huge or small it is, God can be in it and he can handle it. So let's be crystal clear about the vision we have toward change. Nehemiah, to his credit, was crystal clear. I want to rebuild the walls of the city of Jerusalem. And we don't know how long he told the king that it was going to take, but you know what we do know now looking back is how long it took. It took 12 years. And Nehemiah had a vision, and then in the moment, since it's kind of condensed, we actually get to see the next step, which is an actual plan of how he's going to get started. Look at verse 7. This is what he says to the king. I also said to the king, if it pleases the king, let me have letters addressed to the governors of the province west of the Euphrates River, instructing them to let me travel safely through their territories on my way to Judah. And please give me a letter addressed to Asaph, the manager of the king's forest, instructing him to give me timber. I will need it to make beams for the gates of the temple fortress, for the city walls, and for a house for myself. And the king granted these requests because the gracious hand of God was on me. This is incredible. This guy is a cupbearer. But he's praying and thinking over 4 months about the change that needs to happen. He's not sitting around wallowing in, I wish somebody would do it. It needs to be different. What's everybody's problem? Why is this world so messed up? Why doesn't my family ever change? Why isn't my life ever different? He, for 4 months, is praying that God would give him clarity. And now he is not just praying, not just setting even a clear vision, he's planning. Now, I think this gives us some insight into why we need to pray for a while before we set a plan and take action. Let God give us the wisdom and insight. Anybody taking a pretty big step forward and you did something and you were going to change it, but you didn't bring God into the equation and it kind of, anybody been there? Yeah, we have, right? We know how that works. Let God give you the wisdom and insight. Let him give us clarity around the vision and practical steps to make it forward. Proverbs 19:2 says it like this: enthusiasm without knowledge is no good. Haste makes mistakes. That's pretty true. I mean, life proves that out. He's thinking about Nehemiah, what God could have been developing in him. He puts together a vision and a plan, and he is now obviously more prepared than he was 4 months ago to actually jumpstart this sort of life change in his life. He is thinking about what could be, and now he is developing a plan to get there. And that was like a line in the sand for Nehemiah. He had to decide, am I going to throw this out there to the king or not? Now, the brokenness in the city created a burden in him that became a no turning back moment. And in his case, he got to ask for help from somebody who happened to be like the most powerful man in the world. But what is it going to be for you? What is your next step that you need to take? You don't have to have all the plans. You got to have somewhere to jumpstart the vision you see. Have you taken time to outline a clear plan of how you're going to get started? What is the next step? What is the plan forward? So many times our disgust with our lives or whatever it is ends right there. We're just disgusted. We don't like how the world is. We don't like how our family's set up. We don't like how our life is. And we get upset about it and we hate how it is and we know that change is needed, but we never get to the point where we actually put together some plans to attack it, one step at a time, making progress forward. I'm reminded that this is so important. God is a God of planning and purpose. Those of you that are planners, you're like, I like to know what my plan is. There are parts of that honor God. He's a God of plan. Control freak, maybe a little far, okay? We'll work on that a different sermon. But God does not do anything willy-nilly. If you go back and you read the first chapter of the first book in the Bible, Genesis, he took 7 days to create the world, and every single step was intentional and methodical and is giving us this image of the purpose of God and how everything matters. Plans that lead to health and growth and honor God are actually very spiritual in nature. They're very spiritual. Even if the plan has to do with food prepping, or organizing your time differently. Our bodies and our days are God's. So when we make changes like that, those steps in a plan, they're actually very spiritual decisions we're making. Maybe you can even think of a few clear steps as we sit here today. Get your notes back out, put it in there. What are some steps you know you need to take for the change you've been thinking about? What does the plan look like moving forward in next steps? And I would suggest that perhaps the biggest piece of executing any sort of clear vision has to do with developing habits that lead to the desired results. Habits are like the building blocks of seeing real change. Whether we realize it or not, we are driven by habits that got us exactly where we are today. So if we want to see change, then a huge part of our plan forward has to be about changing our habits. And that does not have to be an overwhelming task. Small changes make a big difference. I saw this recently. I thought this was really true. First of all, we falsely conclude that small good decisions don't really matter that much. And we falsely conclude that small bad decisions don't really matter that much. And both are not true. Small decisions, whether good or bad, matter a lot. It's not typically the huge things that steer the ship. It's a lot of times the small decisions, one after another, and the enemy can get into those little decisions like it's a bad decision, but it's so small. Don't even worry about that. That's not going to bother anything. And over time, it changes the trajectory of where we're headed. So if we can reorient our minds to know that good decisions, no matter how small, And bad decisions, no matter how small, matter. We want to make sure we make good decisions, not hitting the snooze one more time, deleting the app, sending an email to the right person, not sending an email to the person we know we shouldn't, kind of generate. Whatever it is, those things matter, and they could really start moving us in the right direction. The same thing is true, of course, with bad decisions. We just write it off as not a big deal sometimes, but what if we just took a hold of all the little decisions and we bring them into the light of Jesus? And we just like, God, every little decision, I know this moment is also yours. I want to bring this into the light to move my life in the direction that I know honors you. Minimize the small bad decisions, magnify the small good decisions, and over time, habits will be formed and changed that honor God. Sean Covey says our habits will make or break us. We become what we repeatedly do. Some of our plans have to have some intentional effort spent on changing some habits and developing new habits. And if your plan is going to be, you think your plan, you're hoping it'll be perfect and all the details will be sorted out. Well, it's probably not going to be that perfect. But you do the best with what you know God has given you today, and he'll guide you along the way. There's a great book called Atomic Habits, if you're looking for a book. And here's a quote from that book. All big things come from small beginnings. The seed of every habit is a single tiny decision, but as that decision is repeated, a habit sprouts and grows. Roots entrench themselves in branches, and branches grow. The task of breaking a bad habit is like uprooting a powerful oak within us. And the task of building a good habit is like cultivating a delicate flower one day at a time. And maybe you're like, I don't really know what to do with a delicate flower. It's okay, right? It may sound daunting. It may be like, what is all this? My head's hurting with vision and plan and habits and all this. Maybe you just need to pull back to a very simple principle that I think helps all of us. And that's this: do the next right thing. Just do the next right thing. In everything we're doing, it doesn't have to be some giant end game that you can overwhelm us. We're so, we're thinking we got to fix everything right now. Instead, think about what the vision, direction you want to go, and do the next right thing. Some of us, it may be like, I know I need to start serving. I've got to use my time towards serving. So maybe you don't know where to serve. There's so many areas in the church. You don't know where the need is. You don't know what your gifts are. Start with a conversation. Get educated on the need. Start serving somewhere. That doesn't work out super well, or you're like, I'd like to try something different. Switch teams. It's okay. Get started and do the next right thing. You know you need to do something with time management. Make a little bit of a plan. Start following it. Notice the habits that spring up along the way and start addressing them one at a time. The next right thing, one after another. You know you need to change your spiritual life. And you're like, I'm going to be a person of prayer. I don't pray now, but I want to. And I'm going to pray 3 hours a day tomorrow. I'm going to make the change. Nehemiah did it. I can do it. I'm going to start praying 3 hours. How's that going to go? Right? You're going to be staring at the ceiling going, God, if you hear this, I don't even know. Right? Because it's hard to build that discipline overnight. Do the next right thing. Start with the realistic plan, which includes growing along the way as you go. Little steps at a time, changing habits, which include us addressing the good and the bad habits. Success isn't some end game way down the road. Success is doing the next right thing today and the next right thing tomorrow and the next right thing the next day. And along the way, we start going, I'm not doing so bad. I actually see some progress in my life. I'm actually engaging in the things that I know I care about and purpose that honor God. Look how things are changing. And friends, God is going to meet you all along the way when you live that way. Do the next right thing today and put your life under construction. Now, please don't get bogged down by all the steps. And just, I can't do this. I don't even know. All that's too stressful. I'm just going to stay where I am. Don't do that. I got to think Nehemiah along the way had moments where he wanted to quit. He wanted to not take the step. He wanted to not do the next right thing. And yet we have the privilege of looking back over the life that he lived and the example that he set, that he was willing to keep taking the steps, and truly the trajectory of Israel was changed. And God has given us, friends, the opportunity and the tools and the passion we need to maximize this one life. We get one shot. He's already given us what we need. We have to funnel it in the right direction. Last week we prayed a prayer that we called the Nehemiah prayer, and it was just our one sentence little prayer to kind of get us jump started on this. In fact, how many of us prayed that prayer at least one time last week? Anybody pray that prayer? All right, a few of us did. So I want to just end today with praying that prayer again and asking God to continue to help us to take those steps. Some of this can be overwhelming. Let's pray that prayer out loud together. Would you pray it with me, the prayer that's on the screen? Lord, give me the wisdom to know what you want me to do and the courage to do it no matter what. That's a simple prayer that just is asking God to be in front. I was blown away by a few stories this week of people who were like, I didn't even know I was going to need that prayer. I had no idea what I was going to be facing, but it was perfect timing for what was happening in my life. Friends, God has something more, and he is ready to do the heavy lifting in our hearts. He will move mountains through prayer. He'll change things we have no ability to control. He will give us all the resources and things that we could ever dream as we put ourselves in position to serve him and make the changes that honor him. Let's pray together. Lord, would you help all of us just focus our minds and our lives? There's areas that they've been bothering us. They've been burdening us. They've been in our minds and hearts for a bit, some of us for a long time. And perhaps right now in this season is the time where we're putting a spotlight, or you're putting a spotlight in an area that we know needs you. It needs change. God, we know you're going to do your part. We know you're going to shape our hearts. We know you're going to provide a path. Would you open our eyes to clarity of vision and the steps we need to take to see real change in our lives? We pray in the power, in the name of Jesus. Amen.